Years of exile, being scattered, fractured, no national existence. How do we come back to being a nation again, to be that kingdom of priests and a holy nation, like it says in the Torah? You'll be this vehicle of bringing goodness, godliness to the world, of morality and spirituality. And how do we do that after this, again, long exile? So we saw a lot of the sources that spoke about what we call the natural redemption. There was two, from the beginning of those that weren't here, we spoke about these two scenarios in the Bible, in the rabbis, throughout the sources of miraculous. There's a miraculous redemption. All of a sudden you wake up in the morning and find yourselves in the land of Israel, fully built, the temple built, all perfect right away. Miracles like the leaving of Egypt, miraculous 10 plagues, splitting of the Red Sea. But there was the other option, and also scenario in the prophets themselves, of what we call the natural redemption, the slow developmental historical process that takes place through time, development, stage by stage, not perfect, not complete, but develops through natural political, geopolitical means of getting together. So that we saw a lot of the sources of Kalisher, of Gutmacher, of the Or Chaim Kadosh, the Radak, how, and again, the significance of understanding this redemption process that comes in a natural way was to get used to seeing Hashem, God's hand, as he works in nature, in the world. Seeing him in the miraculous, when there's miracles, there's no great scholarship required. You see miracles, you see things that defy the laws of nature. But the everyday, the mundane, where's God in all that? That's more difficult to see. Up to the point that people say that's not God, that's Mother Nature, that's the rules or laws of nature, input, output, there's no room for God in this. There's the world, the laws of existence. But the emunah, the ability to see Hashem in all that takes place, the mover of history, the mover of nations and things, and all that takes place is the unfolding of the God's pushing of the world towards that perfected reality that he has in store in mind for creation, with and through human free will. And then we saw again that the rabbis concluded, so to speak, that it will be the natural way, that the final redemption will be in a natural way. We saw the Radak on the sheet that you have, those that weren't here, the second source here, that first he says how God's will also comes through man. In other words, it's indeed from God, the final redemption, the perfection of the world, everything is from Hashem. He says yes, but he adds these few words based on this commentary of the Radak, of David Kimchi, on Tehillim, that he brings it about through man. Indeed, it's from God. Salvation is from man, good health. If people say that God made you sick, God will make you healthy. We talked about that, not to go to doctors because you believe in God. No, he made you sick, he'll make you healthy. But he says yes, but he brings it about through man, through doctors, through the wisdom that he gives human beings. All that is also from Hashem. Hashem isn't just in the heavens, so to speak. He's the one who also in heaven and in earth that guides all. And that was the summary of a lot that we've seen before. But so too, the final redemption comes in this way in order to teach that, to teach mankind the recognition, the awareness, the meeting face to face with God in this world, the recognition of his hand that works clandestine in through the laws of nature. And that's what we saw a few sources up till now. And now we got up to the bottom of the sheet, Rav Moliver. Rav Moliver, in the Common Era, 1824 to 1898, one of the founders of Chovevei Tzion, the precursor to modern Zionism, the Chovevei Tzion, the Lovers of Zion movement, of trying to get the Jews to wake up and to come back and to buy land, whatever is possible, to come back to the land of Israel. So we'll see what he says. Even though natural events will lead to redemption, this is no mere historical accident. In other words, you could think, natural history, it's all random. It's politics and maneuvering, and that's not God. That's all accidental. He says there are no coincidences in the universe, since God's will is also manifested in the course of natural events. Again, such a simple statement, but that's hard to see, because you don't see the hand of God. You don't see any supernatural. The opposite. It's all natural. But who's behind all that? Who created nature? Who is the name Elohim? In Gematria, the rabbis say the certain name of God, Elohim, is the numbered equivalent of Hateva, of nature. Not that God is nature, not Spinoza, but God is the source. He's revealed also in nature and through nature.
flows through UK Vavke?
Right, it's opposed to Yud Kei Vav Kei, that's 26, like the number equivalent. Elokim.
Alukim.
Elokim is 86, which is the same number, equivalent of Hateva, called nature. That God, the aspect of God that works in this world and through this world, the clandestine hand of God, that in the natural, like we say on the prayers, Hashem Elokeinu b'shamayim v'ba'aretz, in heaven and in earth. So on the earth, it's more difficult to see because the senses, the five senses we have, don't pick up anything extraordinary. It's all seemingly, like I said, explainable, almost, through nature. But that's again, also the Maral says, Maral of Prague, just on that one sentence of coincidences, he says, nothing is coincidental. The Maral of Prague and Gruat Hashem, one of the giants of Jewish thought, a few hundred years ago. We have stated many times that one must not say that an aspect of the redemption is coincidental, and certainly not the order of its development. Because the bigger things, even more so, are the more godly and more divinely directed. The bigger things in the world, the redemption of the world, the Jewish people coming back to land. Rather, it is all by the word of Hashem. So there's no coincidence. It's all the hand of God. And that's what we said. That's what we're not just teaching it here, but that's how God teaches the world. That he brings the redemption in such a way that you'll get to recognize me. You'll see and understand that everything is from Hashem. Everything. There's nothing outside of the divine plan. And the amazingness, the greatness of how he works, this great coordinator of orchestration of history, of reality, of bringing about the things exactly, and hopefully we'll see as we go on, it's an amazing phenomenon of, again, it's with free will. We have free will, everyone's doing their own reasons, for their own purposes. Like the Megillat Esther, right? The salvation from the second temple. The Purim, right? The Purim. Everyone had their reasons for what they're doing. Haman, Achashverosh. Everyone has their own accounting and reasons, and through that, God is weaving the redemption of Israel. And after that, we're like the building of the second temple. So too, that's what teaches us the Megillat Esther, and the ability to see and recognize that's what we call emunah. Not just I say I believe in God, or something from whatever, I don't know, in the air or whatever, but to see the hand of God, the beauty, the grandeur in nature, in the world, in reality, every moment. Now, every moment is full of meaning and purpose. How to connect everything to Hashem, that's what we're here for, to elevate all, to connect all, to bring life and meaning and purpose to all. So here he says, there's no coincidences. Accordingly, it is for us to rouse, since it's a natural process. If it's miraculous, you sit back and wait. You can say it's miraculous. I'm waiting for God to do. That's what we saw Rav Alka like previously, those who weren't here, right? The redemption will come from people will start doing and working. So he says, since it's a natural process, we have to do all that we can to rouse the powers that be to treat the Jewish people favorably, whereupon divine help will surely be forthcoming in gathering exiles in the Holy Land. We have to do our part. And like I said, he did that. He was like the movement of Chovevei Tzion, of Zionists, of, the lovers of Zion movement. He worked with Rothschild, Baron Rothschild, to start buying land and get cargo, whatever he can do, and from Turkey, different things, try to facilitate the process through what we can do. But natural means, meaning what we can do, it's in our hands. Also, that's in this book. For those who aren't aware, I'm reading from, this is from Eba Mani Smecha, here's a picture. Avtachta, Hashem Yakom Damo, a Rav in Hungary, later Czechoslovakia, later hiding out in Budapest during the war, World War II. Ultimately, he was killed, murdered on the way to the train to Mauthausen, I'm not sure. But he was writing a book when he was hiding out and trying to understand what's going on in the world, like all of the Jews around him. Like Hungary was the last place to go, all being liquidated, and what is Hashem doing here? And the whole book, the conclusion of seeing how this is the redemption process, God's bringing us back to Israel, the liquidation of the exile, and the conclusion that we have to do all that we can do and not to wait for miracles. He himself was in this group of Hasidic thought that felt that his Rebbe, can say the Munkat, he brings it down, the Munkat Rabbi, a giant obviously of Torah, but felt it has to come, we have to wait for miracles. To sit back passively. And again, the whole book is to show that that is wrong. He says, I myself erred in that, was that sin. He says here on page, the author's confession, I also felt that that's what I was taught. We have to wait, to be religious, be a good Jew, put on tefillin, and wait for God to bring you salvation, right? The woman in the flood we mentioned last time, right? The woman's waiting in the flood, she goes up, a helicopter, boats, no, I'm waiting for God. But to see the helicopters and the boats, that's from Hashem. So that, it sounds simple, but here again, he felt differently until he realized the whole book, he says, no, and I was wrong, and when I thought that way, and we have to announce it and publicize it and show, and the whole book of sources. He's hiding in the attic in Budapest. Anyway, I wanted to bring you this idea of turning to the nations, doing all that is possible. So he also writes how this actually brings from the Minchat Yehuda, the Rabbi Alkalai, who was from the previous source, who was living from 1798 to 1878, also one of the precursors to modern Zionism. So he writes already then that this great matter requires us to entreat the kings of the earth, that God will motivate them to set us free and allow us to return to our possession and our forefathers' inheritance. And this is way before the Balfour Declaration. Who would have thought that the nations will agree to let you come back? We mentioned that the first source, right, the first sheets of Kalischer, of Guttmacher, that also the beginning of the 1800s, redemption will come about through an awakening of well-despised Gentile leaders and governments viewing favorably the return of the Jews to the Holy Land. Again, in the 1800s, who would have thought that? Who would have believed? The Jews had no rights. No, they were a nation, not even considered as individuals. No, that the nations will agree. But that's, again, through the source, the understanding of the natural redemption, which requires, again, which comes through human, even kings, against the source you have on the, again, back to the Radak, after what I quoted you before, that God, the redemption is from to God, only unto God is salvation, individually and collectively, the national, and he'll bring it about through man, as he brings the examples for that, just like he did the second temple, came about through Koresh, and not only a human being and a king, a non-Jewish king and an idol-worshipping king, but Korach is it's called Mashiach Hashem, it says, the messenger of God, that he uses even these kind of people. And so too, the Radak continues in the second source in the sheet. So too in the future, he'll bring the redemption through the awakening of the Gentiles, nations, that will let you come back. This is way before Rav Kalischer Guttmacher, right? Rav Dak was in the 1300s. So we see this concept of what we call the natural redemption through political maneuverings, etc. And that's how God works. A lot of sources in this book also, of Teichtal, again, it's been translated as you see, now they came out with another edition, which is like the abridged edition, because he has a lot of rabbinic elaboration here. So I guess now I have it, I didn't get a chance to see what's different, but it's much shorter. So those who want to, again, it's a classic, it's an important book of these sources of understanding this, Hashem's workings, Hashem's history of today until today and the ramifications. But we have to do all that we can do. And that we brought down a lot, the sources for that in this book as well, that we have to do as much as we can do, and then God's help will be forthcoming. Maybe just...
question. So, Goyim also play a role in the process of redemption?
Okay. Koresh. Okay. But not only everyone. I mean, all of history, all of reality. Nature. He says here how, with the Pasuk in Tili, we read this morning, Rosh Chodesh, Kuf Daled, 104, how the winds are the messengers of God. All of nature, natural phenomenon. I heard someone, the rabbi said, how the World War I was this divine maneuvering to free the land of Israel from the Turkish didn't let Jews buy and then possess and any rights here. So World War I, like again with the Balfour Declaration, whatever, England got the mandate, etc., and gave it to us, so to speak, till they rescinded that order. But the Balfour Declaration, that was World War I, like freed Eretz Yisrael from this oppressing force. It didn't let us come back. And World War II, in a hard way, but freed the Jews from the exile. The Jews still thought that we have hope for the future. We could live quietly and peacefully as religious Jews, whatever, in exile. So World War II freed the Jews from that exile mentality, so to speak, realizing that the future wasn't there. It's still the lesson hasn't. They still have to go. But again, it's a historical phenomenon that enable, that free and facilitate the process and push things to go. Here he writes how we have to take practical steps. Then the will of Hashem will succeed through them. If, however, they rely on prayer alone, they will never achieve their goal. Since we did not strive to return to our Holy Land, he writes, all of our prayers that we recited up till now were ineffective. This is why we have not seen any positive sign. Again, so this is at the end of a conclusion of why the redemption hasn't come. We've been praying for 2,000 years, and rabbis and scholars. And he said, we didn't try to get up and go. We did the praying, but as he brings down the Gemara Nida, page 70, before that he brings down these three things of what should a person do in order to become wise. The Gemara says in Nida, you should study, learn. You want to be wise, you have to study. No, many people try that, it didn't succeed. No, they also have to pray. And the Gemara concludes, one without the other is not enough. You have to do both. You have to do all that you can do, human actions, and prayer. And also if you want to be wealthy, etc., all these things. And he says, the conclusion of Techtel, prayer without action and action without prayer do not help. That all of man's affairs, one without the other, is insufficient. If a person prays to achieve something but makes no effort at all, he will never achieve it. We saw that, and again, for those who weren't here, we saw a lot of sources. The Rambam, the Sefer Ikrim, one of the classic books of Jewish thought from hundreds of years ago, of the obligation for human diligence, human efforts. And then God's blessing will come about. And then he summarizes it, he brings the Midrash, the Sifri, which we should remember that, Sifri, in the book of Dvarim, the Midrash Halacha, on the Bamidbar in Dvarim, but in chapter 14 in Dvarim, there's a verse that God's blessing will be upon you in all that you do. And the rabbis read it, they say the blessing of God will be upon you, and they put in these extra words, they interject, so to speak, and they say, can it be if you yashev batel, even if you sit idly and do nothing? He goes, no. The rest of the verse, his blessing will come through the efforts of Maseh Yadecha, and the works of your hands. In other words, God's blessing comes through you. What in English they write the expression, God helps those who help themselves. But that's what the rabbis say there, that the divine blessing, do nothing and sit back, the divine blessing will come? No, you have to make a receptacle, you have to do your work, you have to do what you can do, and then the blessing of God will continue. That's what he says here out throughout the book. But since we did not do our share, however, if we do our share, we will receive heavenly assistance. Again, we must first do our share, and then a holy blessed one will do his. He brings out a lot of sources for that. Maybe just one last thing here, page 264 in the English, on that topic of, that's what I started with, right? This great matter requires us to entreat the kings of the earth. And that's what Rav Oliver did. He went, and again, with Rothschild, and to write, and to connect, and to get to the kings, and let them agree to buy the land, and to free whatever we could, to buy plots of land. And he goes on, Rav Moliver. Again, he was a giant of Torah. He has a response to literature, this Rav Moliver. As the prophet proclaims, go through the gates. You have to go. You have to do. Clear you the way of the people. Cast up the highway. Lift up an inside. And Yeshayahu's intention is clear, says Rav Moliver. We must awaken and do all in our power to clear away the obstacles in the path of redemption. Then, and only then, shall we be worthy of, behold, the continuation. The Lord has proclaimed unto the end of the earth, say to the daughter of Zion, etc. Redemption. In other words, we have to do all that we can do, and then God's help will be forthcoming. There's actually, this is, you could say, hinted at in what's called the Atbash code. You ever heard of Atbash? There's a sort of encoding of the letters of the first letter, like A and Z. The first letter with the last letter. Like you switch the letters and you...
A word? In a word?
Yeah. But how do you do it? You take one letter and you see its opposite, not its opposite. Like A, you switch with Z. Like in Hebrew, Atbash. Aleph...
It's a code?
I call it a code. I'll show you. It's written in the Tanakh. There's already, the Gemara talks about Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalid, Hey. And it's called At-Bash. Like At-Bash is like the sign of this code, because you switch the Aleph with the Taf, or the Taf with the Aleph, the Bet with the Shin, and so on. Taf, Reish, Kuf, etc. In other words, you switch this letter. There's in the book, I wrote down here, in the book of Yirmiyahu, 25. It says Melech Shashach. Shashach, this king Shashach. Who is this king of Shashach? No one knows who that is. So the rabbis explain Shashach is the shin is a bet. So what do we have here? Bet, another bet, and Chaf switches with the Lamed. What's that? Bavel, the king of Bavel. This is the Gemara in Sanhedrin. This is the Tanakh. It's not a code. It's hidden. You could call it a certain type of codification on releasing different hidden messages, whatever. But it's not like it's a modern thing. Someone, again, in the Gemara, and talks about it in the Tanakh, that there's already a Daniel, the book of Daniel uses this coding referring to different things. Or
There's a lot, like there's also 50 something.
Again, the switching of the letters. There's a lot. There's other appash, other forms. But why did I bring this up?
To protect it.
Why they did it, why maybe the king of Babel didn't want to say explicitly, I don't know. But it's used throughout different sources. But why do I want to bring it down? For the word mitzvah, the word commandment. This is also the rabbis, the word commandment, right? Mitzvah, right? A commandment. So what is my concept? What I wanted to show you, that we have to do our part. We start, and then God's help, the blessing, the divine influence, the metaphysical energy that will come through that mitzvah. But we have to start. I would say it's like, you know, those, I don't know, cubes that use for, I don't know, for cubes or the triangles.
Rubik's Cube?
No, for persona. How do you say persona? Advertisement. Like there's letters that change, like the letter that the cubes change. You have a different letter. A sign is public. You know, how do you say sign? Signs. And if the letters change, it all of a sudden a different message. You know, another word changes, whatever. Here, you take the mem tzadik. You take these first two letters in the cube, so to speak, and you change them to, again, based on this atbash, how do you say, switching or code, you get yud, and this is a hey. Right? The tzadik is the hey. You get yud k, and then what are you left with? You don't have to say, don't say the name, but you get yud k, the name of God. In other words, you do the beginning of the mitzvah. Was you impossible. You have to do your efforts. You put on the mitzvah, the tefillin, whatever. You start. You do the yud k, and what does that do? That causes, exposes the divine. Like when you do your part, and now a God is revealed. His energy now can come through, or whatever. Like, you do your half, and then God will complete. Like what he's saying here throughout. We have to do our part, and then God's help will be forthcoming. So here it's hinted at in this. It's all brought in the Or Chaim HaKadosh brings this down. This idea in this word on mitzvah, on the atbash, that you start, and the rest will be forthcoming. You just have to do your part, because the mitzvah isn't. What does it affect the world? That's a deeper topic, right? Of the effect of what the mitzvah I put on tzitzit. It's strings. What is? You go to a demonstration. You go, I don't know, do something big and change the world. How does this affect the world? I want to make a better world. I put on tefillin. I keep kosher. How does that affect the world? It's seemingly just some minuscule. But actually, as a Nefesh HaChaim, the student of the Vilna Gaon, has a whole book on what you can call the metaphysical universal influence of Torah and mitzvot. I would just commit him based reminded because of this metaphor. It's like you open a valve. When you do a mitzvah, you're opening this little tiny faucet. It's very tiny, it's very small, it's very minuscule, whatever it seems to be, there's minutiae of details, whatever. But that actually opens this tiny faucet, but that enables, you're connected to this faucet, this infinite flow of how do you say a pipe in Hebrew? Tzinor. Tzinor is the same letters of Ratzon. We have these pipes to God. In other words, the mitzvot are these pipes, and again, not these physical metaphors, but these pipes, the will of God is revealed through these pipes, so to speak. When you open the little tiny faucet, but that tiny faucet is connected to, if you measure by the value of the mitzvah, what am I doing? Little tiny thing is meaningless. But that pipe is connected to the Ratzon, the will of God, the infinite flow of waters, whatever. Like in electricity in the house. I'm just opening up a little thing, but that's connected to the main lines of the whatever, until you get back to the power source in the electric company, whatever. In other words, through that little thing, but that enables this flow of energy that is infinite, that comes through these tiny pipes. That's the joke of the guy, the Bedouin tent, and he comes to someone's house and he says, wow, he sees that you opened up the faucet, and you have running water. He says, wow, that's great. In our tent, we have to go and then fetch the water from the wells, whatever. It's very difficult. He says, what's the problem? He goes, here, how do you do that? He goes, we have a faucet. I turn the faucet. Where do you get that? He says, to the hardware store, you get a faucet. So he goes and puts the faucet in his tent. So if there's nothing behind it, obviously, in other words, the mitzvot, there's something behind it. The valve isn't in and of itself. The mitzvah isn't some isolated event in the tiny act that we do. This event is godly described or prescribed that this is what opens up valves of energy, of light that comes through. Like this is the mem tzaddik that you do. But that enables the yud kei vav tei to come through. That enables this infinite source of light, of energy, of uplifting the world beyond what can be even humanly contemplated. You're doing more for the world than any other, what we think is changing the world, bettering the world. You have to do all that we can do in the regular means also to make a better world and in society and culture and in the ecology, etc. But if you do what the mitzvot do for the world, what energy is released, that changes the world, picks up the whole system to higher levels, connects it to the source of all. But that's again hinted in this thing again, the mitzvah. You do the mitzvah, the mem tzaddik, you start, and then yud kei vav kei, the name of God, this light that is attaching it to the source of, beyond the electric company, to the source of all energy. And that's a little bit what he says here. What I wanted to get to now is, I would say, maybe one of the main sources and understandings that all these rabbis that we brought up till now, that the redemption will come in a natural way through the kingdoms of the nations, kings of the world, etc., political maneuverings. Where'd they get that from? In other words, indeed, there were two scenarios, but how did they decide? How did they? It was so clear to Rav Or Chaim Agadol, to Radak, to Ramban, Rav Molev, Rav Kalash, Rav, and others. But I didn't bring them all. How did they get to the conclusion that the redemption will come in a natural way? So for that, I wanted to expose or release or share with you a source, like I was going backwards all this time, like the rabbis 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 500 years ago, that talked about this natural redemption, seeing God in the natural and working in the final redemption will be in a natural way. Also the Vilna Gaon writes, like the Radak, just like the second temple was this natural way of coming back, of Ezra and Nehemiah that built and worked and the Jews gathered, there wasn't miracles. So too the final redemption will be the second way, not like Pesach, the miraculous, right, the hand of God that's clearly revealed. But where they all get that from, so to speak, or where is that source for, again, we saw the prophets, and we'll get to that soon also, going backwards even more to the prophetic, to the biblical source. But I want to share with you this very, I could say, central source on this topic. It's not one source, but it's brought down in many, many places, but we'll see it here. This is from the Talmud Yerushalmi, and this you should remember, because again, we'll see the words that we'll share with you here, what the rabbis say, and that's the catchword, the code word for the final redemption, to be aware of it, understand. This is from the Talmud Yerushalmi, right? We have the Talmud Bavli, the Babylonian Talmud, when the rabbis in exile, I think redacted like in the year 400. And then, but there was the Talmud Yerushalmi before that, redacted by Rabbi Yochanan in Eretz Yisrael. He didn't leave Eretz Yisrael. Like the Mishnah was like the year 200, I think. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi wrote down the oral law. That was from oral up till then. It wasn't something new. But from some Sinai, there's the written law, and there's that which God gave also, the oral law. And that was redacted. They're going into exile, so we wrote it down, edited or redacted by Rabbi Yochanan in Eretz Yisrael, and later, 100 years later, the Talmud Bavli. A lot to talk about these two Talmudic sources. During the exile, it was mainly studied the Talmud Bavli, and maybe we should take time, but I don't have that much time to talk about why is that, and it's not because one is better. Actually, a lot of sources that say we go by the Yerushalmi. The Rambam, in many places, goes by the Talmud Yerushalmi when there's a difference of opinions. There's another rule we have. The rabbis say we go by the Talmud Bavli because we go by the later opinion. In other words, the later opinion saw the previous, not because he's better, but he saw the previous within each group. Like the Rishonim, we go by the latest. The Achronim, we go by the later. That he saw the previous and saw the different opinions and has this advantage, so to speak, to see the different sides. The Rif says we go by the Talmud Bavli because it's Batra, it's the later. And there's other reasons, again, I don't want to get to now, but the Talmud Yerushalmi is also more difficult to learn because it was written in that time when the decrees, and Rabbi Yochanan, despite of all the decrees and against learning and studying, he didn't leave Eretz Yisrael. It's more, as we'll see, of a deeper understanding, it's more prophetic. It's more, the land of Eretz Yisrael has this more prophetic assistance. And it's like, the Talmud Bavli is like a person, maybe a blind person in a dark room, or a person in a dark room, or a blind person. When the lights are out, he has to feel his way for everything. He touches everything. And there's an advantage to that. He touches all the details. He sees, he feels all the corners and everything. When the lights are on, you didn't notice all the details. You see the bigger picture, you see the whole, this holistic view. You don't notice all the details necessarily. Because in this overview, like in the day, you don't see the stars. It's the light, so you don't see all the details. The Yerushalmi is more in this light, and the prophetic light, that it's, the conclusions are right to the point. This is how it is. In the Talmud Bavli, in the dark, there's like you're groping in the dark. It could be this way, that way, all the different proofs, different, bringing the analysis and bringing this, an example from here. What is it? Maybe like you learned Gemara. You see, it's all the different opinions based on, again, he brings the source from here, they bring another source, but this source says the other way. And there's a give and take, back and forth. What the Talmud Bavli itself says in Sanhedrin 24, that the Talmud Bavli, there's a verse in Echa, that this is the Hoshivani, B'machshakim Hoshivani, that I sit in darkness, like the Torah in darkness. And the rabbis say that's the Talmud Shel Bavel, that's the Talmud Bavli. The darkness, it's not dark. The Talmud Bavli is the light, but it's the light that, again, little drops of light that go outside of Eretz Yisrael. So they're the rabbis in Talmud Bavli, not like the one looks condescending on the other. The Talmud Bavli says in Sanhedrin 24 that the Talmud Bavli is like the Torah in darkness. We'll get to that, a lot of the sources about the difference between the two. So it's more difficult to learn when you don't have the reasoning. Like, this is the conclusion. But how'd you get to that? How do you say the ramifications or applications to other situations? When you have the rules, the back and the forth, and you have the proof, so to speak, how you got there, then I could continue it in a new case. This is what we do in the Talmud Bavli. We don't have electricity, airplanes, whatever now in the time of the Talmud. But the principles given in the oral law, we apply them to new cases. Because the principles still apply. Laws of Shabbat and Kashrut, all the different things. We know the principles, so to speak, and you can continue the line of thought or the application in different cases. The Talmud Yerushalmi is like, this is how it is. It's more difficult to learn, it's more concise, unfortunately, it wasn't learned so much. In recent times, Rav Goren and others that started to return to, again, the giants always learned it. Like, it's not something new that was hidden there. The Talmud Yerushalmi always existed. But it's, like I said, less commentaries and less studied, less famous, let's say, less publicly studied, except for the erudite few. And now, like I said, recent generations, there's a return to the study of the Yerushalmi, which is, again, part of the redemption process, to come back to this light of Eretz Yisrael. But nevertheless, you see the difference here when we get to this case of point in case here, of this Talmud Yerushalmi from the beginning, the first tractate, Brachot, in the first chapter, and in the first law, as you see, Perik Rishon, Aleph, Aleph. It's not the first page, but it's in the first section, what's called the first halacha, in the chapter 1 of the first tractate in the Talmud Yerushalmi. And what does it say? Rabbi Chia, it's in Aramaic, it's also more difficult sometimes. Rabbi Chia Rabbah, Rabbi Shimon ben Chalafta, these two rabbis, Rabbi Chia the Great and Rabbi Shimon ben Chalafta, they were walking in the Arbel Valley. Anyone know what that is? Anyone did hiking? Anyone in the north?
Oh, yes, about Tiberia.
Right, though, that mountain, like that mountain cliff. Right, people go down, whatever. The Arbel, it's the mountain cliff, whatever. The valley, the mountain, the Arbel Valley there, Bekritsta, in the early morning. They were walking one morning, early morning, in that place. And they saw the morning star starting to shoot forth its light. In other words, before the dawn, at the morning star starting to rise before the sunrise. Amar Rabbi Chia Rabbah, the Rabbi Shimon ben Chalafta. Rabbi Chia the Great, the big, turns to his friend, Rabbi Shimon ben Chalafta, and says to him, Bei Rebbe, my master, Kachi gulatam Yisrael. Thus is the redemption of Israel. Here it doesn't say two ways. If you remember from the beginning, those who were here from the beginning, the Talmud Bavli in Sanhedrin talked about there's two scenarios. It could be this way, it could be that way. If you're worthy, if you're not worthy, different sources, back and forth, different, again, biblical sources. Like I said before, two scenarios. Here, all of a sudden, it says, Kachi gulatam shel. Thus is the redemption of Israel. This is how it's going to be. How? Batchila kima kima. What does that mean? At the beginning, what?
Step by step.
Step by step, slowly, slowly. It's two words, or it's the same word twice. Kima kima. Kima kima. Those are the words you should remember, because you see it in Chazal and Midrashim and other people that say kima kima. That's the catchword, the code for what we call the natural redemption. As opposed to the miraculous, kima kima is the slowly, 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 stage by stage, piece by piece, step by step.
And this is from seeing a star
Oh,
in the morning sky.
how does he get to this? Kol ma she'olechet, yira ba'volechet. They're seeing the sunrise, right? They're starting to see the sunrise. And he says that's how the redemption will be. A slow developmental process like the sunrise. It starts slow, and as it goes on, it gets bigger, like a snowball. It gets bigger and bigger. So you're right. At this point, there's already a lot to talk about. This metaphor of the sunrise. I don't know where to start. One of the things, if you already mentioned it, is, as you know, and the rabbis pointed out, that the idiom in English, whatever, darkest before the dawn. Like Dafka before the dawn, you have the night, the dark, and then the day. But before that, there's a stage that's even worse. It's even darker. So you can imagine, let's say, the sunrise. You have these two people that are back to back looking at the sunrise. One is the east, one is facing the west. So one starts to say, wow, the day is broken, the dawn is started, the day is beginning. And the guy says, what are you talking about? It's dark, it's even darker than before. It's even, what do you mean? It's dark, I don't see anything. He says, no, it's starting, whatever, you can't see, it's beginning already. So he tries to convince him, they wait a little bit longer. The sun starts to rise a little bit more, it becomes, I don't know, one side becomes a little bit red. And he still sees, I don't know what you're talking about. It's dark, it's almost as dark as it was before, maybe even worse. Getting a little bit more light, but it's 99% dark and 1% light. And you're talking about, you're so convinced the redemption has begun. Everything is starting, it's beginning already. What are you so jumping up? It's 99% against one. A little bit of tiny light, maybe I see a little starting. But the majority is still darkness. That's what's going to overcome. That's what determines history. No, the majority, the reality, what you see in front of you is dark. So a little bit light, high sun starts to rise more and more. And he says, you're right, it's becoming a little bit more, I see a little bit more of light. But again, the majority is against you. The odds are against you still. Again, it's even higher. And then he's almost about to be convinced, and then all of a sudden clouds come. And he goes, you see, it's dark again. He goes, oh, you see, I told you so. So too in the redemption, there are those that do not see, and don't see any light, and don't see what's taking place, and don't know what we're talking about. What are you saying at the state of Israel? Each stage they can say, the returning of, from we had a few thousand Jews here, now almost 10 million. And they stated the Balfour Declaration, the ability to come back again, the land giving its fruits again. We'll see all these signs and what the rabbis talk about. What are the stages? But they see stage by stage. The Jewish independence hasn't been for 2,000 years. The army, the air force, economy, and no, but it's still. You see how much. Look how much darkness. Look how many bad things. Look what's not complete. You're right. Stages means the first thing we conclude. Stages means that it's not all complete right away. Indeed, it's not all perfect. You can point out a lot of darkness, a lot of deficiencies, a lot of negative, a lot of not religious, anti-religious, all that. But stages mean just that even though it's not complete, doesn't mean it hasn't begun. That's what stages mean. If it's all or nothing, so if you can point out something that's missing, then it's not all, therefore it's nothing. That's the miraculous. It's either all or nothing. When the curtain goes up, it's all clear. If not, that means it's nothing yet. But stages means, kima means exactly that, stage by stage. And again, one stage after the other. It's not stage 10 yet. It's still stage 1. You're missing 9 other stages, 9 other phases. It's still not complete. You can point out imperfections, and you're right. So what are you so happy about? What are you talking about redemption? A secular state, all the complaints that people are experts at pointing out the deficiencies. And all that is true. But they don't see, and they're facing the wrong direction. They don't see what is taking place and the stages of what take place, and to recognize the significance of each stage and how it's important. And what our job is that, not just to say it's redemption and say be happy. It's not complete. We have to work towards the completion, but to recognize what is taking place, to recognize the hand of God, and therefore to know how to judge it properly and to know how to guide it. Otherwise, you can misjudge it and misguide it. You think it's a child that is mischievous and wrong, and get rid of the child, throw him away. Not recognizing that this is a good child. There's a new neshama in the world. The baby is born. He's dirtying his diapers, etc. This is what I waited for, a prayer. I prayed for a rabbi, a scholar, and this baby is just, I gave him books to read, and he starts ripping up the pages. So throw him away. No, we don't throw him away. We recognize that there's a neshama in this baby. But he's developing like babies develop in childhood, in stages. We talked about this, the stages of development. And then he reaches... he's a nice child and learning, whatever, but doesn't do the mitzvot yet. Not even obligate, right? Before the bar mitzvah. What kind of Jewish child not doing the mitzvot? And then later he reaches adolescent stage, b'chlal, rebellious, everything that we say, they say the opposite. But understanding the stages and knowing how to guide him and direct him towards it, because that completion is there, that holy soul is already there. It's just a matter. In this world, things unfold in a natural developmental process. There are miracles, and there will be miracles, there have been miracles. But the main guidance, we'll see, the Ramchal and others, the main guidance of God, not just the redemption of the world, is through this world, in this world, to bring this world, and we'll see why it comes this way. God can do miracles. Why not just finish it all at once? No questions, no problems, But there's a purpose, like we said before, a little bit I hinted, bringing the world the world is elevated, the world is redeemed, not just like my metaphor of picking up the child that's learning to walk and just bringing him to the kitchen, to the destination you want to. It doesn't learn to stand on its own 2 feet. God brings the world in this natural process. The world is elevated from the bottom up, stage by stage. The world changes. Man is redeemed. Not just he picked up a geographical relocation, but there's a new mentality, a new reality of his connection to Hashem, to goodness, to holiness, to being good. Is a whole the whole cultural revolution that will take place in this process that takes place from and within nature itself grows and participates and rises up. But that we'll have to do next time, B'ezrat Hashem. Talk more about it and the sources that are brought in this source. B'ezrat Hashem. Continue. Kodesh Tov.